All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here for our second Jersey Collective Reads meeting that we've ever done. We're really happy this month to have read Hurricane Girl by Marcy Dermansky. And if you have read it, great, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it and are excited to talk about it. If you are here and you have not read it yet, we will try not to spoil anything. I don't know that this is a book where there's like huge, maybe there's some things that could be spoiled, but I don't know. I'm a very like person who doesn't believe in spoilers. Like I feel like stories can be told in different orders and like it's not necessarily why you read or watch something is for like exactly what happens, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, hopefully if you have not read it, I think by the end of this evening, you will definitely want to. So yeah, so thanks for being here. My name is Kerri. I am the founder of Jersey Collective, and I'm also a public librarian by day, and a writer as well. So this was sort of a new initiative for Jersey Collective that I wanted to do this year because I felt like there are so many great books that are about New Jersey or by New Jerseyans or touch on New Jersey in some ways. And I felt like this was a good opportunity to kind of go through that. And then I asked Courtney to be involved with this as well. So if you want to introduce yourself, Courtney, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Really excited to be here. Really excited to chat with Marcy. I'm Courtney Preiss. I grew up in Monmouth County and just a couple of years ago moved back. I live in Asbury Park adjacent. And I'm a writer as well. I recently sold my debut novel to Putnam Penguin Random House called Welcome Home, Caroline Klein, and it'll be out next year. And it is a novel that takes place in New Jersey. So I also really love any books that take place here in and about New Jersey, writers from New Jersey. This is just, thank you. This is just really, it's an exciting series and I'm grateful to be a part of it. So thank you, Kerri, for having me, and thank you, Marcy, for being here.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and Marcy, do you want to introduce yourself and your friend there?
That's Ginger. Ginger just left, but they might come back. It's so funny when I grew up being from New Jersey was a source of great shame, honestly. And my mother used to always say when she met people, she's like, oh, we live outside of New York. Like that's how she told people where we were from. And there was like a Desperately Seeking Susan, that movie where Madonna's like, where have you been? We thought you were dead. And she's like, oh, I'm not dead. I'm from New Jersey. And so that always stuck with me. So now I'm a New Jersey author. I used to live in San Francisco. I used to live in New York City, but I'm in Montclair, New Jersey now. And I embrace it.
I love that.
Yeah. And I love this is Hurricane Girl, and Courtney wrote a little description of it. She put it on a Facebook, an Instagram story today. She's like, a homecoming to New Jersey, or a return to New Jersey. I thought that was so funny. Like I hadn't thought about the book in those terms, but that is exactly what the main character does. It's true.
It's so funny. This will be one of the questions I ask you later, or part of it, but it didn't occur to me until like embarrassingly late that this was a homecoming story. I think I described it on Instagram as like an abstract painting of a homecoming story because it does technically like hit so many of those beats of that kind of homecoming trope, like Allison returns to her hometown. She reconnects with an old love. She's kind of doing this reappraisal of her relationships with her family and with her friends. But like it, because you told it in such a stylish and unconventional feeling way, it took me until really toward the end of the book to be like, oh, this is a homecoming story. But I loved that. It's such a great addition to the genre.
That's fun. Yeah, and it never occurred to me till you wrote it this morning. I was like, oh, that's what this is. So thank you too. Yeah, I love when people can just bring things that they read it and they find things and they say, oh, is this what you meant to do? And I'm like, yes, that is what I meant to do. But I think when you're writing, 'cause you're a writer too, you don't really know what you mean to do until you've done it a lot of the times. And that's a rewarding thing about writing, I think, right? It's just sort of discovering it by doing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't know, Courtney, did you want to just run with that question? Because I know you had more stuff that you wanted to say about that. We can jump around, that's fine.
We can start with that question. That was sort of, yeah, that was a preamble to a couple of questions that I had. I was wondering if, you had any favorite homecoming narratives, either in novel or in film, or just sort of anything in that vein that served as an inspiration or something like a spiritual sibling to Hurricane Girl.
1 second. Hey, Nina. Sorry about that. It's funny. I don't see, this is where I feel like I didn't do my homework, but I didn't know this was a question I was going to be asked. Homecoming books, completely blank right now. I think it's just more like the pressure of being on the spot. I think
That's totally fine. That's totally fine.
Yeah, sorry.
If you think of it later, we can.
I think it's a great question. I'm sure I could think of many. Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, right? Usually people are going to places in the Midwest or, no, like everybody's leaving the city and coming to somewhere else is basically the homecoming. So I think it's super common and I can't think of one. Yeah. I wasn't inspired by that particular idea, I guess, but I probably wasn't. I don't even know it. Yeah.
I'll throw you a softball fun question
Thank you.
then to start off, which was the original plan. Well, I know from your Instagram that so swimming is a big thing in this book. We do see her, the main character Allison is always wanting to swim and go to pools. So I know that you also swim, and so I'm wondering if you have any favorite swimming pools in New Jersey that you've gone to, or any that you'd like to go to.
Well, the swimming pool that I would most like to go to, honestly, is I'd want to go to the one in Texas. There's one in Austin. It's like that outdoor quarry pool. I just,
Fish's Eddy, yeah.
Yeah, I really want to go there so badly. It just seems really gorgeous and cold and exciting, and that's a pool I want to swim in. And I just made a friend who has a swimming pool, so I'm really looking forward to that, because when people have pools, you get to usually get into them before Memorial Day. That's always the problem when you don't have your own swimming pool, is you're sort of dependent on public pool schedules, and I don't really like to swim indoors. And yeah, and a funny thing that's been happening, this is the second book in a row. I want to branch out. I have 2 books in a row where it's really important to the pool. It's just so important to the characters into the story, and so that's limited, but it just happened that way. It wasn't intentional.
That's funny. Yeah, I feel like there's a book that's out that just came out recently too. Is it called The Swimmers?
The Swimmers by Julie Itzoka.
Yeah, I have that sitting downstairs. I haven't started it yet.
I have to read that too. I think I was a little intimidated to read it just because it was also about swimming, and I was afraid it was going to be better than mine, so I haven't read it yet. Yeah, but I can see Elizabeth Benedict just like saying something. My old writing teacher from college is here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's funny. Let's see, what else do I got here? So you said you grew up in New Jersey. Have you were you always in like sort of the Essex County area, or did you live in
I was from Englewood. I'm from Englewood, New Jersey, which is Bergen County, which is really nearby. And after having lived in many different places, I'm now in Essex County because of Montclair just sort of appealed to me. Like I literally went to a reading at a bookstore, watching booksellers, and there were 2 people in the audience, and they were like, you should move to Montclair, because I was back at my parents briefly, and I just did. There are lots of publishers in this town, and there are a lot of writers in this town, and it's close to New York. And if I always thought, like, if I'm going to come back to New Jersey, where am I going to go? So this suits me better than Englewood. And then like Courtney lives in Asbury, and I used to think like living near the shore, that would suit me even more, except that school, I have a 13-year-old daughter, so this was like a better place, I felt like, to send her to public school.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else did I want to ask? Courtney, do you want to ask anything? We can talk about some of the like more processy stuff, unless you had any Jersey questions.
Maybe we can circle back to the Jersey questions and end with a couple, because I feel like those are fun to open and close with. We can bookend, for lack of a better phrase, no pun intended. Yeah, I'd love to hear about your process a bit. I'm curious how long it took for Hurricane Girl to become a book, sort of from inception to publication. I was trying to think about maybe the timing. I read Very Nice when we were in like deep lockdown. Like I remember that being a companion book during the 2020 election for me when I very badly needed a companion, probably also needed an Ativan. That
Yeah.
book was just like a different kind of companion. That book was just like such a balm for me. And so I wondered if you had written Hurricane Girl during like deep lockdown, or just would love to hear a little bit more about how the book came to be and its
Yeah.
origin story.
Right. I mean, I'm really lucky in that I had about 90% of the book written before deep lockdown because during that whole quarantine and lockdown time, it was a terrible time for writing because I was home with my daughter every day because she didn't go to school. And basically I rewrote the ending. I had my agent involved, and so I wrote the end. But if I wasn't already working on something, I didn't write it all once I finished the end. But it really just started with the idea of a woman getting a house and losing it. Like that was all I started with. And so then I was like, oh, well, let's see where I go from there. And so that's just what happened. And it took me about a year. And then in the first draft was not, the first draft had, the first 100 pages were about the same. And then I didn't know what to write. Sometimes what happens when I don't know what to write, I'll just write another scene and I can get really boring, like, because I don't know what I'm going to do. And if I don't know what I'm going to do, the characters in this book will just continue to go out for turkey sandwiches. She kind of goes back to New Jersey and gets sad, and she goes out for turkey sandwiches with her friend, and the book just ends. Like my agent's like, is that it? He's like, you have to confront what happened to her at the beginning of the book. And I'm like, I do. I didn't really want to. And then of course it was what I had to do. And then I just did it. Second time around, I just did it right. So it wasn't like a lot of revision, but I kind of took 100 pages and tossed them and then wrote a new 100 pages. Yeah. And then didn't write at all. Sold this book during the pandemic, which was a great thing, but otherwise didn't write at all during it. Just didn't write. So that was fun. Yeah. So I was happy to have succeeded in this. And so, I mean, there are some people I think writing, I mean, everybody has a different pandemic story. I think for the longest time, nobody wanted to hear anybody's stories, but I think like maybe 5 years from now, they're going to be pretty interesting. Everybody has a story. I feel like nobody doesn't, and they're very different, but I feel like moms with small kids were just losing their minds. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so,
it's definitely a couple of different camps. It was either the like too much going on, how could you even think about writing? And then I hear from, I think I hear a lot anecdotally, maybe because a lot of people talk about how difficult it is to kind of query or be on the market right now. It's like, well, everybody's trying to sell their pandemic novel. And I'm like,
and it
how many
might be.
people actually wrote a pandemic novel? So two different
Yeah.
camps. I'm curious about how you know when an idea for a novel, because right, you've had to sit with this for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're working on a long form idea, like it's going to keep you company for a while and you have to really be in it. How do you know when an idea is the one that you want to pursue for your next novel, that you want to commit your time to and be like,
Right?
this is the
Oh
idea
my
I'm going to
gosh.
be with?
That's like the biggest question. That's like my question always. It's so hard. Like for me, I don't know, you just finished a novel. For me, starting a new novel is always just the hardest thing. And I usually never, there's always this idea with working authors is that you want to start a new novel, but there's a long time you sell a novel and it doesn't come out for about 1.5 years. That's pretty much standard. And sometimes it's longer, but it's almost never shorter. And the idea is always like, wouldn't it be great if you started a novel in between that time? And I've never been able to do that. Like I've started things in that time, but I've just thrown them all away. And the scariest thing is like when I start something, it's like writing 100 pages of Hurricane Girl that I threw out. Like I'm working on something right now and I'm not even committed to it. I just really wanted to be writing and I had a beginning, but I still feel like I might be writing something now that I might throw away, which is really not very happy making. And if I do, I do. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, some writers seem really good at always having the next idea. And I think having the right idea is hard. And I feel like sometimes, I don't know, like I feel like like sometimes you want to write books where characters have different professions, or you want to write in a different time frame. And I feel like it's coming upon that time where I might want to challenge myself and go out of my comfort zone and take people out of the swimming pool. And I try in the beginning of my writing career, the characters were not in New Jersey, so now they have to go somewhere else, perhaps. I don't know, but it's hard, and I think that's hard for most writers. And I think most writers have books that don't sell, that they don't talk about. And I did write one short book after my second novel, Bad Marie, that I had a bunch of 3 characters, and they pretty much go off on a spaceship. A girl gets abducted by aliens and she's on a spaceship, and that book did not get published.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I have my spaceship novel.
That's cool.
I wish
Yeah,
more people
that's
talked about their spaceship novels.
Yeah.
I love to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's got to be, sometimes I'm like, there has to be good stuff in my spaceship novel, you know what I mean? Like, but it just didn't have it had a good beginning, and it didn't have a middle, and it didn't have an end. I just didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, and I just kept on writing. You can do that. I try
That's
not
cool.
to do. Yeah.
That kind of backs in nicely to a question I had written down, which is that, so Hurricane Girls, it's your 5th novel, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people might think like, oh, you've written books before, like, isn't it easier? But like they're all different, and it's a different process, I'd imagine, every time. But so yeah, I was wondering if you had anything to say about like, how does it feel to be at a point where your 5th novel, and how is it different from like writing and releasing the ones that came before? Does it feel like you're starting from scratch every single time?
I think it feels like you're starting from scratch every single time. I feel like in terms of like having a book come out and knowing other writers and having connections and knowing what that process is going to be about, like that experience is really good. And I think with every book, it builds upon that, and certain things happen organically from experiences before. And I just always believe that I should, there's that word should, like I think it was Julian Cameron who's like, you're never supposed to say the word should, right? Like get it out of your vocabulary. But I feel like I should just be so much more confident in writing and all of that, and I'm not. So yeah, that's annoying. Right. Yeah. I think that's the end of that.
I think that's definitely relatable, and I think that like aspiring and new writers will definitely be happy to hear that.
I guess so. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Sometimes I think there's something so excited, even about having a first novel out and being brand new. That's a pretty great place to be. And yeah.
I appreciate the candor.
What's that?
I said I appreciate the candor because I keep hearing how difficult subsequent books are. I keep hearing things about like, oh, the second book is actually impossible to write, and every book just gets harder. I subscribe to Kate McKeon's Substack, which is wonderful for anyone who's interested in like writing, publishing stuff. I think it's called Agents and Books. She just gives a lot of advice and a lot of like agency intel. And she did a newsletter a couple of weeks ago that was like, every book gets harder. And I'm just like, wow, that is a sobering thought. Thank you for dropping that in the chat. It's a great Substack, worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely, I will too. I mean, at the same time, I mean, sometimes I approach writing like it's a job. Do you know what I mean? So I'll just sit down to write. I'm like, oh, I got to write another book. Like it's a funny thing. Like this is now how I make money. And so, and in that sense, it really does inspire me and it pushes me on. And sometimes people will say, oh, you've written 5 books. Like that's so much. And I'm like, well, that's how I make money. Like I can't just, I either have to go, I never made it into the teaching world, which is what so many writers do to earn a living. But I had an MA and not an MFA. And so in the beginning of my career, it made me less marketable. And then I kind of got used to just sort of writing without a teaching job. I edit people's books. Like that's how I also make money. That's how I kind of supplement my income. But I just feel like, well, if I write another book, I'm gonna be good. You write a book, you sell it, and you're good for like a few months or like a year or maybe even 2 years. But then you got to do it again. You just never get to stop. But it's kind of like the life I chose. It's pretty lucky that I'm able to do it. Like I feel that gratitude pretty much constantly. Yeah. But so hard. I mean, I think it's always hard. But then I guess if you wrote a book and it wasn't hard, maybe it wouldn't be very good either.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
There's always like the joy of like writing a good sentence and having something, even in the projects that I start that don't work, there's always good sentences in them. Like anytime you throw away material, there's always really good stuff in it. Like I love that. Like I love writing. I just wish I always was working on the right next project. Yeah. I've been trying to get people to assign me novels, but nobody will do it. Yeah.
Let me see. Yeah, I had some, I guess we can pivot to some more of the like book specific questions too.
Sure. About the book itself.
Yeah, I was wondering, so obviously this is a New Jersey related series that we do. So New Jersey is one of many settings in this book. There's you know, Allison, the main characters, for a good portion of the book, she's heading back to New Jersey, where her family is, but there's also, you know, mentions of and we also see bits and pieces of LA and North Carolina and Miami. So I was wondering if like how you chose these different settings, or if they're all places that you know well or that you've at least been.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny, I haven't ever really been to, like, you don't have to know things. Like we were talking, you and Kerri and Courtney and I were talking before about the building in Fort Lee, by the way, which isn't exactly your question, but there are 2 towers in Fort Lee and they're pretty famous at this point, and there are swimming pools on them. And I've never been inside them. So that's a great thing. You don't always have to know what you're writing about. I literally just went onto Google and I found pictures of the building and and then I winged it. So I've never been to the beaches in North Carolina, but it was funny. I was already writing this book and I'd already sent them because I was just thinking, where would there be an affordable beach house to buy? And I thought North Carolina. And later I have a friend who, it turns out, every summer she goes on a trip to a North Carolina beach. They drive from Montclair and they drive like 18 hours. They leave in the middle of the night. And I was already working on this book and I found out about this trip and I just put it in my book. So I put my friend's trip into this book. And so that's actually in the first chapter, you know, where they sleep all night. So that was fun that I got to use. Usually, I mean, I'm always stealing other people's stories. So I stole, and actually it's the book, that was my friend Allison's story. And so the main character's name is Allison. And I basically, sometimes when I write, I use placeholders for names. I'm always switching names because I don't know what the perfect name. And Allison was supposed to be a placeholder, but then I got attached to it. And I have a friend named Allison. And besides her trip to North Carolina, this book has nothing to do with her at all, like zero. I mean, I steal so many things from my own life. So I asked her permission and she let me keep Allison. So that was nice because I wasn't going to do it without asking her. But Miami, like in the end of the book, they go to Miami and they see pelicans. And I think I need to travel more because I haven't been traveling so much lately. But the last really good trip I took before the pandemic was I went to Miami with a friend over spring break and we stayed at a really cheap hotel. We didn't stay at a nice hotel. And I saw pelicans on the beach and I was so happy. I was like, pelicans, pelicans. And so there was more material. So I feel like we, as a writer, like I feel like with the pandemic, some people are just out and about and doing everything. And I feel like my life hasn't really quite kicked back into gear the way others have. I haven't really been traveling or doing much of anything. But I feel like traveling is really good because you never know when the one trip you take is gonna be in your novel. So yeah,
I relate to this very acutely. I have also not kicked back into full gear, and it's a relief to hear that, you know, you don't have to be necessarily in North Carolina to write it. You didn't have to go inside the Fort Lee buildings. I appreciated all the details of those buildings and was sure that you had at least visited somebody and knew that they smelled like Febreze in the lobby or something. I was like, oh, she must have actually been there and pulled this from life, but no. So
it's funny how one specific detail can make you convincing, right? I think it was the Febreze. I went to a hotel in New Jersey with a friend, like a waterside park, and it was awful. And and my friend was like, this place smells like Febreze, and it just stuck in my head. So I gave it to the apartment building. So yeah.
I love that.
I also wrote about Paris once, and I've only been to Paris for like a weekend. Unfortunately, I've never really spent a lot of time in Paris. And I went onto Google Maps and I found a Ferris wheel that I wanted to write about. I found it and I watched French films, and I feel like it's better if you can go to places, but if you can't, that with the internet and with film, you can make a lot of knowledge that's not firsthand. I don't know if that was articulately put. Yeah. Like I see we have a question.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. Maybe maybe we'll bounce around and we'll actually like
Or do you
let
want
the
to wait till the end?
audience
You get
ask
to
too.
run the show.
Let me okay. You should, so the audience should be able to unmute now. So if Katie, if you want to ask your question out loud so we can have it in the recording, you can unmute.
Oh, sure. Hi. Yeah, hi. Hi everybody.
Hey.
I was wondering, I don't want to like mess up your flow. You can always go back and forth. So especially in Hurricane Girl, I was very astounded by just like the very deep trouble that Allison keeps getting into. There's parts where I was like, my heart was just beating for her. Like, oh my God, especially, I don't think this is too spoilery. It's okay. We started with that. Like, there's parts where I was so nervous for her. I got so nervous. And even when she was like parts where she's driving and then after she's injured. And I am wondering what your process is for keeping your characters in just like that really big trouble. Like you don't shy away from it. And I think that is not easy. So I'm wondering about your process for like how many times you have to revisit that, or if it comes pretty organically in a first draft, or like how you have the discipline to like really get them into this big trouble that you get them into.
Sure, that's a great question. I mean, it's always with this book, I think it happened pretty organically. Like I think that wasn't tons of revision. Like early in the book, I had this funny idea that I was going to make the main character a horror scriptwriter, which is such a joke because I basically didn't want to make her a novelist, which, you know what I mean? So I made her a horror scriptwriter, which is the same thing. She's a writer. But because she's writing horror scripts, all of a sudden I had this dawning. It wasn't planned, but I'm like, oh, she's a horror writer, so I can put her into a horror story. And so suddenly when she goes into the cameraman's house, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm writing like horror story. And I didn't know. And it was just so fun. It's just so fun to surprise myself when I'm writing. Yeah. And then it happens big. Like I didn't know. It's a small spoiler. She gets hit on the head. I didn't know that was going to happen until it happens. And I think I don't know. I really do like plot. Like I feel like some writers shy away from plot. And I think you want to make things happen quickly, especially in a book, because people can always turn and watch TV. So I don't know, but I don't have a process for it. I just know it works better when you don't wait. You know what I mean? Like the faster you can set things up, the better. And then there were times when I was reading it where she goes back into a house that she shouldn't. And she's like, my friends would say, don't go back into the house. And I reread the book a few months ago and I was like, don't go back into the house. Like I was scared reading it. It was a really stupid thing to do. But I guess I set things up. You know, it's fun to set things up and then your imagination takes over. It's just, you don't know. I didn't know what I was going to do any of those things until I did them. And I didn't know that the doctor was going to be her first boyfriend for a little while. I remember I was writing the scene in the hospital room and I'm like, who should the doctor be? And I kept changing him. I didn't know who the doctor was going to be. And then all of a sudden I remembered my old boyfriend. Boom. See, that's what you get on a Zoom. Like that doctor is based on my first boyfriend. And I made him my first boyfriend. Like his name is Danny Tang. There are only 16 people. Danny Tang is based on Andy Tang. So the Andy Yang. So there you go. And it's just fun. That's why writing is fun. Like when you can do that. Yeah.
This is
I don't
such
wanna
an
derail you.
exclusive.
I'll hide myself. I'm gonna hide myself again so I don't. I
Okay,
feel like
yeah. You're very brave. I wouldn't do this.
I know. I threw the question in there. And
yeah, we should have just read on screen, but it's really fun to have you. Yeah.
There's the pull quote too. I'm hiding again. That was wonderful. And
okay.
And it's so scary so many times. Okay.
Thank you for your question, Katie.
It's good to see you, Katie. We can segue into, I know Kerri and I have a few more questions about the book specifically. And, you know, I have a couple of questions about Allison's character. You know, Marcy, you do such a stunning job of mapping out her interiority, I think, including and especially the places where she's, I mean, again, now that we're all here, we know that Allison has gotten hit in the head relatively early in the novel. There's certain places where she's feeling confused and disoriented. You know, she's trying to reconcile what happened to her and how she's ended up where she ended up. And it just created this kind of vibe where, like, when she felt agitated, I felt agitated. And when she felt satisfied and at peace, I felt satisfied and at peace. It was a little bit of like an E.T. Eliot thing going on. I don't know. But So I'm curious about, your sort of process around writing the interiority, like what the challenges and the joys are around writing the interiority of Allison's character. And did you have a specific approach to, trying to remain faithful to somebody's thoughts as she's recovering from a traumatic brain injury?
Yeah. So one of the things I really like writing the most, even, and it can be in first person, but even if it's in third person, like a close third person, is I love the interior monologue. I just love being inside somebody's head. Like that's just, I think that I know that's my favorite part of writing. And one time, just once I thought, oh, I'll try to change I'll try to write a screenplay based on one of my books, and it's all dialogue, and you can't, when you write a screenplay, you can't write the interior voice at all, and I can't do it. Well, I gave up really quickly. But so that's one of my favorite things about writing. And in terms of like the brain injury, I mean, I've had really interesting people read this book. Like I've had people who had traumatic brain injuries read this book and tell me I did a wonderful job, which is such a relief, because there's so much autobiographical material slid into this book, like tiny little things, but I've never had a traumatic brain injury. And so I don't know, somehow I was able to go there. Like somehow I got that right. So maybe that says like something just about the state of my mind anyway. Yeah.
I'm remembering like a specific page where I want to say, I'm like, don't hold me to this. I want to say it was about midway through the novel. Could have been a little earlier. It could have been a little later, but there's a scene where she is, I believe, at her mother's house, and she's standing there with her brother, and she's like, why are we all here? It's not Thanksgiving. But we had just lived this whole moment with them. And that kind of, but I think that the reader just like follows, right? Like there's something, I guess, not untrustworthy. It sounds like the wrong word, but like there's something that should make you kind of want to question what's really going on here, because she is suffering from a brain injury, but we're following very closely all along. Like we're mirroring her thoughts and feelings. It was very powerful. I also wanted to say, I think that, again, there's an element of violence to this book, right? There's some violent elements throughout, and you do a really great job of cutting that violence with a lot of humor. You have this like signature sort of wry humor, which in part is what makes reading your book such a singular experience. I think that the reader, at turns, because of the violence, might feel inclined to be worried or horrified, and then from one line to the next be actually laughing out loud, which is a really unique experience. I also thought that you did a great job not only cutting it with humor, but sort of like interspersing these small luxuries. I thought was another really interesting kind of method to cut that sort of like the darkness and the violence. There was you had mentioned it before, like the perfect turkey sandwich, or this anticipation of getting a croissant at Starbucks on a long drive, or the feeling of being alone at the public pool on the rooftop in the summer. So just, I'm curious, I have a couple of questions here. This is like a long-winded question. I'm curious how you approached balancing trauma with the humor in this novel, if that's something that comes naturally, or if that's something that you find you have to go back and work on the balance. And just while we're talking about these small luxuries that I think also play into the balance, do you have preferred small luxuries of your own that you like to deploy while writing, which is a little bit more of a process related question?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like working, like, oh, here's this, I don't think, oh, this material right here is really rough, so now I'm going to put something funny in to give my reader like relief. Like, I think writers by committee might do something like that, and I don't. It's just me, and I don't have any process to that whatsoever. It's just like that's how my brain is working, and I feel like there's something so amazing about writing and what our brains do, and it's just what comes into my head. So I don't try to do that. It's just what happens, and I think if I tried to be funny, I think I wouldn't be funny. And so it's like, it just sort of happens. And I feel like in real life, like sometimes when I'm with people who I don't know very well, I'll just say a joke and I'll just say it's so deadpan that nobody even knows that I'm telling a joke. And I get strange looks like all the time, like in my own life. So that's just how I work. And I feel like there's humor in all of my work. And so I feel like in this book, because there is violence and there is trauma, that it came as like a much needed relief. But I don't think I would know how to write without humor. But if I were to sit down and like write a humorous book, I think I couldn't. So there's that. And just little luxuries. I mean, yeah, like that's all life is about to me. And my luxuries are like very small because I'm not rolling in money and jewelry, but like so many of the small details in this book ended up being my details. And I put my cats into the book, and I put here, I brought some props for this Zoom call. I brought, like, this is my favorite water bottle, which is in the book, but this actually isn't my favorite water bottle. Like, I lost this water bottle, and a friend of mine, I had it for years, and a friend of mine knew how special it was to me, and it you know, they don't make it anymore. And she somehow just went online, and I don't know, she found a used one. She actually like queried people, like found a picture and said, "Are you willing to sell that to me?" It was like the nicest gift I've ever gotten. But so the water bottle has always been really special to me. And there's like a scene in I looked page 11, I don't remember, there's just a random line about her favorite coffee mug. And this used to be my favorite coffee mug that I bought from a store in San Francisco. And I put that in the book. And I feel like, so I don't know about you as a writer or any of the other writers watching it, but I feel like we have to keep ourselves entertained. And so I'm always keeping myself entertained when I'm writing. And I feel like sometimes there's all writers are asked this question, like who your audience is, like when you're writing, who are you writing for? And a long time ago, this was so interesting to me, is I went to see Elizabeth Gilbert read when Eat, Pray, Love came out. And it was when the book was really small. She wasn't even that famous at the time. And she said to the group, we were at the Half King bar, that she was writing this book for her friend Darcy Steinking. And like, that was who she was writing the book for. Like, she was writing it to her friend. And I thought that was very cool. But I've never like written a book for a friend. I think I'm always just writing to entertain myself. Like, I'm my audience when I write. And so sometimes I think that's so crazy because I'm getting published and I'm writing for myself, and I don't feel like I'm like the mainstream public reading voice. So it's kind of lucky that I'm pulling this game off. So I'm really pleased about that. But if I'm not entertained by what I write, then there's really no point to it, which I think is why I think everything I write is going to be slightly autobiographical, but I'm always writing fiction. I'm not quite answering your question about process, but memoir is so unappealing to me because it just feels so revealing. So people read this book and they're like, have you had a traumatic brain injury? And I'm like, I have not. People will assume your fiction is real, but it's fiction.
I know, it's so funny because I feel like there's this sort of like, it's like a double-edged sword, because then if you write memoir, I feel like sometimes people doubt that some of this stuff is true. Right? And it's like, well, if I wrote this as fiction, you would ask how much of it really happened to me. So
that happens to me all the time.
If you do, damned if you don't.
You're like, and then you do funny things, like you put your water bottle or you put your cats in the book, so then it really must be true. So that's, you know.
Yeah. Kerri, did you have one?
Yeah, it's nothing to do with what you just said, all of which I loved hearing, but I was noticing all of your artwork behind you on the wall.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, because I know on Instagram you post some of your drawings, so I wanted to ask what it's like to just have these different creative abilities, and I don't know if you have anything to say about flexing the drawing muscle versus the writing muscle.
Yeah,
this is very Elizabeth Gilbert, by the way, like big magic, like the whole creative ecosystem. So there's a good segue.
There we go. That tied it together.
Okay, and I love Big Magic, by the way. I feel like that's just like a really, really wonderful writing book. So yeah, they're just ideas floating in the air and you can grab them. But I mean, I don't take my paintings, quote unquote, seriously. Like, I never went to art school, and I really started to draw and paint when my daughter was like 4 or 3, because I was so bored. Like, while she drew, I'm like, I'm gonna draw too. And then I turned out to like be good at it. I like it. And so I find it's like drawing or painting is just so easy. It's just like, oh, I'm just gonna make this little thing. I make things that are basically relatively small, and they really fill me with satisfaction. And I haven't really tried to. There was a period when I was living outside of New York when I was actually like sketching people on the subway, and it was fun. But mainly I don't do people. I just do flowers, and I do cats, and I've done some houses. And it just you finish things really quickly, and then you can hang them on the wall, and you can put them in a frame, and you can give them as a gift. And I love it, and I find it very satisfying. And there's no pressure, and there's no stress to it at all. And I like that. And strangely, now that I post things on Instagram, I just do it. Sometimes it's just so, like, our whole addiction to social media. Sometimes I really just do enjoy getting likes. You know what I mean? I really just genuinely do. It's embarrassing. But like this week, I made some roses. I'm like, oh, people always like my roses. And I posted them, and I got 100 likes, which I guess for like famous people, 100 likes is nothing. But for me, I'm like, that's 100. I don't know. But so I like it. And sometimes I sell them these days, but I'm never trying to sell them. But people will just say, is this for sale? And if someone asks me, basically it almost always is. Yeah, why not?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see, let's look at the time here. I guess maybe Courtney, unless you had any last things you wanted to ask, maybe we should see if anyone watching has any questions.
I was just looking at a couple of I just wanted to ask a couple of quick New Jersey centric questions, and then wanted to leave around like 15 minutes to let folks in the audience ask. You had mentioned a New Jersey bookstore earlier that I think in part inspired you to move. I was curious if that's your favorite New Jersey bookstore, if you have any other favorite New Jersey bookstores. We love a New Jersey indie, and would take any and all recommendations.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think watching booksellers is definitely very special to me, because it's like it's a very local store. So many of the readings are Montclair authors. And it is part of what made me move to this town, was because there was a bookstore. And I think when I was like scoping out where I was going to live, I went to the bookstore, and then there's a Korean restaurant around the corner. And that is what the first day I went to Montclair on my own, that's what I did, is I bought a book, and then I went out for Korean food. And then when I went to try to move here, I literally got an apartment that was a block away from the bookstore. There was just like, it was one of those sort of magical, easy things where there was just a sign in a barber's window saying apartment for rent. So I ended up renting an apartment a block away from the bookstore. And so, you know, when my daughter was small, we would just walk there like 2 or 3 times a week, because we were just bored, maybe even more. And we sort of talked there and hung out there, and sometimes acted almost a little bit too much like we lived there. Like it was a little bit embarrassing. And like it would just close, and they would kick us out, and I wouldn't even be aware, and suddenly be like 7:20 and the bookstore closed at 7. I'm like, why did you tell us to leave? And so that place is very special to me. And there's a fairly newish bookstore that's just down. It's in Spring Lake, called Thunder Roads Books. And I love Spring Lake. I mean, I love the Jersey Shore, and I love Asbury, but so I really like being able to go to that bookstore, because it's a block away from the beach and has great books. And so that's really special to me. And then I think those are the main ones. I know there's a really nice one in Asbury, but I haven't really gone there that much, because when I go to Asbury, I don't go to Cookman Street. I just go to the beach, and I go swimming, and I get Korean tacos, and I just don't have time to buy books.
I noticed the shout out to the Korean tacos in the book. And
Yeah,
I was just like,
right? Yeah.
Yes, we needed that. We needed the Mogo representation.
Oh, good. I'm glad you noticed that. Yeah, I love going to Asbury. It's gotten, since when I started going there, it's gotten so much more crowded, and they built a huge high rise, and it's changed so much.
It's like Disneyland. Yeah.
Yeah, like I won't go there on a weekend anymore. You know, I really like to go in September and October is what I like to do. And but I still, I mean, I think it's like that you live 8 minutes away from the ocean. I'm pretty jealous about that.
Yeah. I used to live on Cookman Ave, and I could walk to the ocean. Miss that. Nice. But
there's so many great restaurants. Yeah.
So many. It's wonderful. And I think Kerri and I both love Thunder Road and Spring Lake. I think Kerri did an event there last summer.
They did. Yeah. They were great. I know they just opened fairly recently. So it's interesting. I had an event at Watchung Booksellers as well, and that was great too. I did a bunch all over New Jersey in different New Jersey bookstores, and we're very lucky to live in a place where there's so many within like driving distance, I think.
It's really changed, right? Like New Jersey is like interesting. It has bookstores and cafes, and Korean tacos. Like when I grew up as a kid, there was just McDonald's and Chinese food and pizza. And so it's just, you can get anything now. So it's pretty great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I want to open it up to audience questions. If anyone has any questions or comments or anything, feel free to you can just unmute yourselves and ask. I think this is a small enough group that it won't get too unwieldy. So if anyone has anything, feel free to jump in.
I want to ask a question if I can. So this is I'm going to try to ask it without it being a spoiler, but I was I think I was riding my bike when I was listening to your book, and I was shocked when she was hit, I was like, Marcy, what's going on? This is not like a Marcy book. Like women don't get beaten up in Marcy books. Right?
It's true.
And so I was very, it was very disturbing. And then, and your resolution to what the assailant had done, it was like it was also a surprise. And I was sort of, and I'm wondering whether you, without giving too much away, whether you knew right away that like what his motivation was or why he was doing that, whether you kind of had his reasoning or whether that came to you as you were writing it.
Thanks, Lynn. It's nice to see you, by the way. Yeah, no, I didn't know. I mean, I knew that I was going to write horror, so I had him hit her. But then later on, he writes a note and explains why he does it. And I don't know that until I have the note, that explanation. Like I'm like, and I think that actually is why he was off his medication, and that is why he did it. But I didn't know. And in terms of coming back and the violence at the end of the book, I think I said earlier tonight that I wrote 100 pages where there's no revenge and there's no retribution. I didn't want to go there. But once I put her in the house, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to do this. And I think I knew what I was doing because I had her buy glass vases. So I think that was her form of protection. And I don't think she expected to have to use them. I don't know. But
you did, but it was interesting that his explanation, it wasn't as dark as it might have been. Right.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, I haven't been involved with people who are bipolar, but I know so many people who have, and I've had like people I know people who've been attacked by people who love them, and it's crazy. Do you know what I mean? And they're like, and then they get back on their medication and they're lovely again. And that's really confusing, I feel like, to have a partner like that, which I unfortunately haven't. But I think sometimes just hearing from other people's experiences, it made its way into my book. Yeah.
Anyway, it was
sorry to startle you. I'm glad you didn't fall riding your bicycle.
I know. I was like, what's going on here?
That's funny. Yeah, I didn't listen. I've never listened to the audiobook, and so that's like a whole different reading.
Very good.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good audio. Yeah.
Very engrossing. Yeah. But anyway, it was, I remember where I was, and I was like, wait, what's going on here? And I must have like gone back and it's like, did that really happen? No, let me listen to this again.
Is that what you do? You listen to it again? You don't, yeah. That's
but not the whole book, but I mean, it was like, I go back and I'm like, wait, is that what happened? Okay.
I surprised myself too. I totally was surprised writing it. I'm like, oh my God, that's what happened. Yeah.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
It seemed like, wait a second, what's like the sun was setting in the wrong place,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
Thanks. Yeah. Didn't know it was good.
A good surprise. Good trouble.
I mean, for the people on the Zoom, this is what there are 15 people. You were my second writing teacher ever, so it's really nice that you're here.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Yeah. So I posted about this an hour and a half ago, right? So
I know, and I saw it. I was like, I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm there.
That must have been why I posted it. And I posted a picture. This is my water bottle. I made a painting of it.
Right. Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Thank you. I'll hang that up again. Anyhow, so yeah. So
do you draw with your daughter?
She doesn't draw at all. She's like, I have no artistic talent. It's so frustrating because she does, I think everybody could be an artist, whatever, but she just has decided she's no good. So.
And does she like to write?
Well, she's 13, so sometimes she likes to write, but it's not something she does a lot. You know, I think she's going to figure out what she likes to do. She likes to be on her phone an awful lot. She's really good. Like, I think she's actually an artist when it comes to how she puts on makeup. Like, I think that's a skill I've never had. She's really good at it. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what she does. Yeah.
I think we have time for a couple more questions if anybody wants to hop in. If you don't want to turn your audio or video on, you can drop your question in the chat.
The cats. I don't know
Oh,
if you can see them.
this is the third and fourth prop are the cats.
Yeah, they were the inspiration for the cats in the book. And so, I mean, one question I've had from a lot of people is why she doesn't take both cats. And that upset some readers. And I don't know, it just felt too happy. Like somehow I just couldn't do it, and it would have been better for the cats, but one of them didn't want to leave. And so that was like the material was talking to me at the time.
I wondered that for like a split second, and then I was like, she's splitting the difference.
Yeah,
she's
okay.
rescuing one of them.
Okay. I mean, maybe this book would have been a big bestseller if she had like saved both of the cats, right? It could have just changed everything. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, there's no knowing.
Yeah, if anybody has questions they want to drop in the chat, we'd be happy to read them aloud for you, cat related or otherwise. You don't need to turn your camera or microphone on if you have them, so just feel free.
Well, I'll just ask a question if no one else has one, which is like, but one of those questions that is hard to answer sometimes. But are you reading anything that you want us to know about?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, I'm reading a new book right now by Hilary Leichter, so that hasn't come out yet. That's called Terror Story. And this is her second book. Her first book was called Temporary. And she's a really interesting writer because she's not quite in the surreal world, but she really doesn't write about things as they are. Like Temporary was just all about temp jobs that were totally outlandish. And in the beginning of this novel, she opens the door, their apartment she lives with has a baby. She opens the door to her apartment, and it's all of a sudden there's this magical terrace. It's so big, and like their lives just become so much better. But they only have the terrace when a friend comes visit, like this one specific friend. And if that friend doesn't come over, they don't have the terrace. So they're always inviting her over. So she's really great. And that book is going to come out in the summer. So Hilary Leichter, I could type it, but that's new. And that's sometimes my mind goes blank, but I think she's an exciting writer.
I can't wait for that one.
Yeah, all right. And so, but she's not from New Jersey, so I think that doesn't work. She couldn't, yeah.
That's totally fine as a current read. I was going to ask as a follow-up if there were any Jersey writers or books or pieces of media that should be on our collective radar.
I mean, Laura Sims had a great first book called Looker that came out a few years ago, and she actually has a novel whose it's coming out this summer, and I blurbed it, and I can't remember its name, but it's really about like, it's set in a library in New Jersey and about all the crazy people that go out of libraries and, you know, people who look at pornography on the computers, and it's pretty good. So that's going to come out in the summer. Laura Sims, and I recommend that. And then I don't know what I've been reading. So I always love Kevin Wilson's novels. I feel like there's a similarity between his work and my work a little bit, and we're actually friends, which is nice. And I love Rufi Thorpe, who's written about 4 books that are all a little bit out there. And that's what came into my head right now. And I should always be more prepared to answer that question.
We will always take a Kevin Wilson rack.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I like his books a lot.
Yeah.
The Laura Sims book that's coming out is called How Can I Help You?
Thank you.
And this was definitely on my radar as a
That's really
public librarian, so I'm excited to read it.
Oh, you're a librarian, yeah. And I mean, I worked in a library when I was a teenager, so it's different, but it's just a place where people go when there's nowhere else to go. Like the homeless population goes there, and the crazies go there, and libraries are interesting, and they're great.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories definitely can come from that world,
she really captures that like so well. Yeah, I bet you'll really like it.
Yeah, I'm excited to take a look at that for sure.
Thanks for knowing the name of it. I'm not good at
I had to look it up. I was like, I know I've seen this cover, but yeah. Well, if no one has anything else, I'm just gonna drop a link in the chat to sign up for our newsletter. We've been doing these like once a month, so if anyone wants to see what we've got for next month, which we will be announcing shortly, you can sign up there to get that in your inbox once it's available. But yeah, Marcy, where can people find you if they want to check out your work?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's marcydermansky.com, so that's pretty easy. It's where everything is. Yeah, my website.
Perfect.
Yeah, easy. And then I'm the only Marcy Dermansky there is, so if you Google me, it's like it's pretty simple. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad. Yeah, and sometimes what I love, that doesn't always happen, but I feel like sometimes people don't even know that if they love this book, if they read it, that they can go backwards. Like everyone's like, when's your next book coming out? I'm like, well, maybe even quicker. You could just read the 4 that came before it, you know.
That's definitely
Backlists
good
are
to
in.
mention.
Yeah.
Backlists are having a moment.
It's good. It's
Backlists
so
are in.
gratifying, honestly. And I guess we could end here. The one thing that I had fun writing about this is I think in DV, it's called like an Easter egg. Like there's a big secret in the red car, which is basically what kind of car is the red car. And I answer that in Hurricane Girl. And that was really thrilling to write. Like I just put it in there. It's like, so if you wanted to know what kind of car she was driving in that book, you can find out in Hurricane Girl. And that's the only time I've ever done that, like referenced one book in another. Yeah.
We've gotten so many exclusive takes.
I know, I
in this
tell all the real
conversation.
things. Yeah. Thanks, Courtney, for being pleased by that. I think that's been fun
really
for me. So
cool.
I appreciate that. And maybe this summer I'm gonna try to like see if I can come visit you down in Asbury.
You are welcome anytime.
I'd love to meet
please.
you in real life.
So,
Great.
yeah.
Nice. See,
Great.
that's what I do when I make friends who live near the beach. I'm a terrible person. So it's just out there.
Well, both my parents also, they each live in Monmouth County and they both have pools. So you might really want to be my friend now. I want to be friends with both of my parents because they have pools. So
you see, that's hilarious. I'm glad you like your parents' pools. I grew up with a pool, by the way, but my mom, it's closed down now, which is like a really sad thing. There's a trampoline where the pool used to be. Bad decision. Yeah. Oh well. Is that where we're gonna end it?
I think so. It's a good
perfect.
closing note.
Kind of bittersweet, right? It is
Yeah.
nice to end on a bittersweet note. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.